All right. So this will be a short introduction as we're starting our second session in the series. We are so happy to have all of you with us here today as we are starting this 2 p.m. session. It's November 17, 2024, a beautiful Sunday. We are hoping that as it's getting a little cool here in Florida, you all are staying warm. We're getting that sweater weather. The next session with Miss Eileen Maddox and Mr. Peter Terry is about to start. Just some first words. We have, as you all know, this series that's going on and our channel on YouTube and Facebook. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing. This will allow you to see more content like this. And when you like our posts, you're obviously increasing its value in what we are seeing. We will try to produce more and bring speakers like them. With that being said, we thank you so much that in this time, we've been able to have Peter and Eileen return as they have several sessions online that you can watch today. So on Clearwater Baha'is, the YouTube channel, you can actually discover videos that Miss Eileen Maddox and Peter Terry have recorded. With that being said, if this is something that is your first session, we welcome you, please, to continue from where we are leaving off on the Zoom, but also go to Clearwater Baha'is, again, clearwaterbaha'is.org, and you can find all our material right there. So it includes the session details for today, the Zoom link, and it also includes the link to the materials that we're referencing during these sessions. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us and we'll try to assist you. But of course, you can contact Ms. Eileen and Peter directly as they are trying to bridge the gap in our understanding with the materials that we're trying to study together. Now, one last final word. These subjects, they are, again, our reflections with one another. Aside from reading the Holy Word itself and the word it is, everything that we share with one another, it's not an interpretation that's official for any of you. It is solely our independent investigation. And likewise, as you independently investigate, please arrive at your own conclusions and don't take anything that we're telling you as the end-all, be-all, the word. Only the word itself and reading the word itself will be what hopefully you'll be relying on. And this will be serving as some inspiration for your own studies. We appreciate it as you join with us in our discovery, and we hope you too will start your own discovery. With that being said, Miss Eileen, we're ready to actually have you start again.
Okay. Peter did have some computer problems. So that might be what's holding him up, but I will give quickly the announcements for
Splendid.
this. Pardon?
I said splendid. Please proceed.
Oh, okay.
Welcome.
If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. If time permits, we'll answer some of them. If not, we'll be glad to answer them by email directly to you or at the beginning of next week's program. I will post our email addresses on chat as soon as I have a chance. We have a weekly newspaper for the Pentateuch series. Just send me an email if you would like to receive it. It'll give you lots of links and enclosures and all sorts of stuff. There is also an ongoing promotion of 15 to 25% discount off my books, and I'll put those links in the chat box. And Peter gave an absolutely incredible talk on Adam this morning during the 11 o'clock program. And it's truly amazing. I don't know what he's going to say. and he doesn't know what I'm going to say, and yet we meet in the middle so well. And so you will want to stream that as soon as it's posted. So, okay. Okay, Peter still isn't here. Okay, I will proceed with my PowerPoint. Can you all see that?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, very good. So I remembered to hit the share button. Oh, sometimes I amaze myself. Okay, I have named this program all about Adam, Adam, and Adam, the human and the divine. And yes, we're talking about two Adams. And according to the Bob, as Peter talked about this morning, there was also a third Adam and a fourth Adam way, way, way back in history, of which we have no records of all. But I will concern myself only with the Adam in Genesis. Adam and Adam, the human and the divine. Yes, there are two meetings for Adam. One is the beginning of humanity with spiritual consciousness, and the other is Adam, the manifestation of God, who fostered that consciousness. Now, let's start at the beginning to see how these two perspectives on Adam develop. I assume, and at the moment I'm trying to get all these pictures of everyone out of the way, and I think that will do it. Okay, I will assume that most people know the basic story of Genesis in the Bible of Adam, Eve, in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, my emphasis will be on the symbolism found in this saga in order to uncover universal truths. And that starts with actually reading the book of Genesis. Read the Bible? Yes. It's unfortunate that in today's secular society, the Bible is too often dismissed as a book of myths, or is outmoded for our level of education and sophistication. Not so. Abdu'l-Baha wrote, all the texts and teachings of the Holy Testaments have intrinsic spiritual meanings. They are not to be taken literally. We can avoid getting mired in argument with someone who disbelieves in a fantastical story in the Hebrew Bible, such as Adam and Eve or Noah's Ark, if we understand the symbolism that is used, and if we can explain that story in spiritual, symbolic terms. Genesis, the book of beginnings, first book of the Pentateuch. This is our prehistory, yours and mine and everyone else's. From Genesis comes the understanding of who we are and why. There's a lot in Genesis that's of utmost importance today. For example, Baha'u'llah often used Joseph's garment as a metaphor for recognizing him as a manifestation of God. Here's one example of Baha'u'llah using Joseph's cloak as a symbol. Say, from my laws, the sweet-smelling savor of my garment can be smelled, and by their aid, the standards of victory will be planted upon the highest peaks. This is from the Kitabi Akdas. And there's a note for this paragraph in the Kitabi Akdas that states, this is an allusion to the story of Joseph in the Quran and Old Testament. in which Joseph's garment, brought by his brothers to Jacob their father, enabled Jacob to identify his betrayed, long-lost son. The metaphor of the fragrant garment is frequently used in the Baha'i writings to refer to the recognition of the manifestation of God and his revelation. This note continues. Baha'u'llah, in one of his tablets, describes himself as the divine Joseph, who has been bartered away by the heedless for the most paltry of prices. The Bab in the Qayyumul Azma identifies Baha'u'llah as the true Joseph and forecasts the ordeals that he would endure at the hands of his treacherous brother. See note 190, which we will. Likewise, Shoghi Effendi draws a parallel between the intense jealousy which the preeminence of Abdul-Baha had aroused in his half-brother, Mirza Muhammad Ali, and the deadly envy which the superior excellence of Joseph had kindled in the hearts of his brothers, plural. And note 190 states that the treacherous brother was Mirza Yarkiyah, a younger half-brother of Baha'u'llah who rose against him and opposed his cause. Baha'u'llah wrote of the creation of Adam. The entire creation hath been called into being through the will of God. Magnified be his glory, and peerless Adam hath been fashioned through the agency of his all-compelling word, a word which is the source, the wellspring, the repository, and the dawning place of the intellect. To me, this sounds like Adam was created as a manifestation of God, as we know he was, because it says so many times in the Baha'i writings. The creation in Genesis. Genesis offers two creation stories, each with a separate sequence of events and areas of emphasis. The first version is often called the general creation. The darkness and light are separated. The vault, the sky, is created between the waters, and the waters under the sky is set aside to let the land appear. And then the firmament of stars, the sun, and the moon were created. And the living creatures, fish, birds, and animals. And finally, humans in God's own image, and God rested. However, God never rests. There is no beginning of creation and no end of creation. In addition to an inner meaning, it's interesting to note that Shoghi Effendi stated that the coming of Adam, a manifestation of God, took place 6,000 years ago, and we will go over that later in this program. Abdul-Baha said, we read in Genesis in the Old Testament that the lifetime of creation is but 6,000 years. This has an inner meaning and significance. It is not to be taken literally. The second version of the creation story is often called the special creation, and it starts when there is light, but earth has no vegetation because God has not yet set rain. Then streams come up from the earth to water the garden, but there is no one to work the ground. Then God formed man from the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. He put Adam in a garden called Eden, where two particular trees grew, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And this is the first mention of the two trees. They are not mentioned in the general creation. Adam was free to eat from any tree there except the tree of knowledge, because eating from this tree would bring death. God caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep, and he created Eve from one of Adam's ribs, supposedly. Adam and Eve then lived happily, unashamed of their nakedness, which is a metaphor for spiritual innocence. It's in the special creation that the two trees are mentioned, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. Those two metaphorical trees are the spiritual lifeblood for human consciousness. Baha'u'llah praised the role of the tree of knowledge. Oh, how blessed the day when, aided by the grace and might of the true one of God, man will have freed himself from the bondage and corruption of the world and all that is therein, and will have attained unto the true and abiding rest beneath the shadow of the tree of knowledge. And Abdul Baha described the tree of life. By the tree of life is meant the highest degree of the world of existence, that is, the station of the Word of God and his universal manifestation, Baha'u'llah. That station was indeed well guarded until it appeared and shone forth in the supreme revelation of his universal manifestation. For the station of Adam, with regard to the appearance and manifestation of the divine perfections, was that of the embryo. The station of Christ was that of coming of age and maturation. And the dawning of the most great luminary, Baha'u'llah, was the station of the perfection of the essence and the attributes. That is why in all highest paradise, the tree of life alludes to the focal center of absolute sanctity and purity. That is the universal manifestation of God. Abdul Baha also told Clara Barney, who put all this information that he gave her about Adam and Eve and many, many, many other subjects into the book, Some Answered Questions. We are the cycle, not Clara Barney, Laura Barney, excuse me. We are in the cycle which began with Adam, and its universal manifestation is Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah wrote about the tree of life in the Tablet of Ahmad. Verily, this is that most great beauty foretold in the books of the messengers, through whom truth shall be distinguished from error, and the wisdom of every command shall be tested. Verily, he is the tree of life that bringeth forth the fruits of God, the exalted, the powerful, the great. The end of innocence. It was time for humanity to grapple with the challenges on the road to spiritual maturity. Adam and Eve, according to Genesis, whose partaking of the tree of knowledge had thrust them into the next phase of life. God came looking for them and deduced what had happened. Adam blamed Eve. Eve blamed the snake. Who would God chastise first? The snake, who would crawl on his belly, eat dust all his days, and experience enmity between him and Eve and her offspring for generations. Then God declared that he would make Eve's pains of childbirth severe, but her desire would be for her husband, who would rule over her. Turning to Adam, who was probably hoping for the best, but fearing the worst, God decreed that the ground would be cursed because of him, that he would toil on it painfully all his life, until he was returned to the ground from whence he had come. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. Then God said, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. He placed cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth on the east side of the garden to guard the way to the tree of life. Humanity was not yet ready. Traditional Christian theology burdened Christians with the doctrine of original sin, a state of innate sinfulness into which everyone was born and from which everyone had to be saved. Original sin was laid at Eve's door because she had tempted Adam, who in turn was blamed for bringing original sin to mankind. In Adam's fall, we sinned all. This is from the New England Primer, a reading book for school children, first published in the late 17th century in Boston. Belief in original sin and going to hell has caused immense fear of death. Also, original sin was used to subjugate women to men as being inherently inferior, emotionally weak, and untrustworthy. Women are still crawling out from under these old attitudes. Abdu'l-Baha gave an extensive account of the symbolism of Adam and Eve in answer to questions posed to him from Laura Clifford Barney and published by her in the book, Some Answered Questions. One must pause a while to reflect. If the outward meaning of this account were to be attributed to a wise man, all men of wisdom would assuredly deny it, arguing that such a scheme and arrangement could not possibly have proceeded from such a person. The account of Adam and Eve, their eating from the tree and their expulsion from paradise, are therefore symbols and divine mysteries. They have all-embracing meanings and marvelous interpretations, but only the intimates of the divine mysteries and the well-favored of the all-sufficing Lord are aware of the true significance of these symbols. So we have a lot of work to do. Now, Abdu'l-Baha's extensive account runs 5 pages in Some Answered Questions, and I have had to abbreviate his thoughts, terribly, and can only give major thoughts, such as these verses of the Torah have therefore numerous meanings. We will explain one of them, and will say that by Adam is meant the spirit of Adam and Eve, is meant the spirit of Adam, and by Eve is meant his self. By the tree of good and evil is meant the material world, for the heavenly world of the spirit is pure goodness and absolute radiance. But in the material world, light and darkness, good and evil, and all manner of opposing realities are to be found. By the tree of life is meant the highest degree of the world of existence. That is the station of the Word of God and his universal manifestation. That station was indeed well guarded until it appeared and shone forth in the supreme revelation of his universal manifestation. The meaning of the serpent is attachment to the material world. This attachment of the spirit to the material world led to the banishment of the self and spirit of Adam, or humanity, from the realm of freedom to the world of bondage, and caused him to turn from the kingdom of divine unity to the world of human existence. The human Adam, or humanity, had been created for the heights of sanctity and absolute goodness, but then set forth in the world of good and evil for the station of Adam with regard to the appearance and manifestation of the divine perfections was that of the embryo. The station of Christ was that of the coming of age and maturation. And the dawning of the most great luminary was the station of the perfection of the essence and the attributes. The prophet Adam voluntarily left the spiritual realm of his pre-existence behind the mystic veil to enter human society to start the process of divine education. Now, the embryo was the level of the people Adam taught, spiritually speaking, so he was limited to that level. Human spiritual understanding evolved through many dispensations, a process that is called progressive revelation, ending with those of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. That time frame from Adam to 1844 is called the prophetic or Adamic cycles. And interestingly, it says in the readings that the roots of the tree of life was sunk during the days of Christ's manifestation here on earth, and that the first true fruit of the tree of life was the Bab. Abdu'l-Baha commented on the relative meaning of sin. This sin in Adam, moreover, is relative to his station. Although this worldly attachment produced substantial results, yet in relation to attachment to the spiritual realm, it is nonetheless regarded as a sin. And the truth of the saying, the good deeds of the righteous are the sins of the near ones, is established. The prophet Adam reminded man of his innate spirituality. The expulsion from the Garden of Innocence was necessary in order for humankind to experience the quote unquote real world and its lessons, and to grapple with the temptations of materiality and rise above them. And when the holy breaths of Christ and the sanctified lights of the most great luminary was spread abroad, human realities, that is, those souls who turned towards the Word of God and partook of his manifest grace, were saved from this attachment and were granted eternal life, were delivered from the chains of bondage, and entered the realm of freedom. Okay, Abdu'l-Baha said, this is but one of the meanings of the biblical account of Adam. Reflect that you may discover the others. Okay, Abdu'l-Baha gave us the challenge of reflecting to discover other interpretations. So please, you're free to offer your thoughts in the chat box. Reflections of Elena Maria Marcella. She reflected on the meaning of Adam as spoken about by Abdu'l-Baha. Elena Maria Marcella was an American Baha'i who was a Knight of Baha'u'llah to the Gilbert and Ellis Islands, now Kiribati and Tuvalu, and a member of the first National Spiritual Assemblies of the Hawaiian Islands and of Central America and the Antilles. She also served on the Board of Counselors for Northeastern Asia. Marcella was known for her encyclopedic knowledge of the faith, and she wrote an extraordinary book called The Quest for Eden, which was published in 1960, and is probably out of date, not out of date, out of print. Marcella reflected and approached the tree of knowledge as a moral code. Marcella starts by noting that at the time of Adam's appearance, good and evil, as a purely moral code, had first never been introduced to the particular society in which he lived, or second, had been lost through the deterioration and destruction of a former world. And Peter did remark on that this morning. She approached the subject of Adam's supposed sin and put the concept of sin into the context of moral law, which she believes is what he taught. Here, there arises the confusing notion that Adam was overcome by Satan, whereas Jesus was not. And Jesus had to come to redeem men for the sin of Adam. But if we consider seriously that Adam was the garden of innocence, filled with childlike unwisdom rather than wisdom, and governed by a primitive code, which was lawlessness by comparison with succeeding moral codes, we can see how Adam himself, by laying down the first moral law for mankind, also made man capable of sin. The very establishment of any law suggests that it was formulated to correct definite deficiencies. If the law is not obeyed, the deficiencies themselves become the sin, which is punishable in a physical sense by capital punishment, and in a spiritual sense by a continuing low state of moral consciousness. Paul certainly was aware of this, for in explaining the law in Christian times, he said, "For until the law, sin was in the world. But sin is not imputed where there is no law." Logical. It seems that the emergence of moral law would be the mystical key to the legend of Adam, Eve, the serpent, and the tree of knowledge. According to Marcella, Adam revealed to the people of his time the concept of divine moral law. Eve, who represented the human self as well as the soul of man, would suffer severe pain as she made decisions based on divine law. Please note, these severe pains were not related to childbirth. They were related to the emotional, spiritual effort it took to make decisions based on divine law. She would be under the domination of the animal nature of Adam because he would initially be stronger. but she would always yearn for spiritual knowledge and to draw closer to God. Mankind was thus challenged, and that would be hard work, explained Marcella. She wrote, "This great prize was not, however, to be achieved without labor. And this interesting tidbit, omitted from Genesis, has caused Christians to believe that they have been unjustly plunged into a spiritual struggle for their soul's salvation, whereas certain of the Hebrew thinkers of old were well aware of the fact that man would have to win wisdom through a voluntary conquest of the baser aspects of his nature before he could hack his way through the final branches of the tree of knowledge and attain to a permanent spiritual enlightenment. Such a concept of gradual spiritual attainment is neither illogical nor unjust, unless we feel ourselves cheated because we were not born with full sets of teeth, perfect balance, and an innate knowledge of Latin, Greek, and calculus." The Baha'i scholar and educator William Barnes also reflected and approached the creation, fall, and redemption of humanity within the context of the advancement of human consciousness. He wrote a paper titled Mythoi, Stories of the Origin, Fall, and Redemption of Humanity, a study in the topology of the holy books. It was presented at an Irfan seminar in 1994, and Irfan is an organization that fosters Baha'i studies. Barnes considered the two versions of creation in Genesis, the general and the special, which we have gone over. He saw creation as one phenomenon with two aspects. He saw the general creation as a bottom-up process. The ascendant push of life, following the evolutionary development of life on Earth, with humans appearing last. In this scenario, humanity remains within the natural world, and his spirituality grows slowly, guided by the manifestations of God in the process of progressive revelation. The special creation Barnes sees as top-down because it began in the light. The two trees are mentioned for the first time in the special creation. Decisions are made, and the expulsion is the result. The human, the rational soul, is created first, in the light and free from the cycles of nature. Although highest in creation on earth, he falls from his original state. Having been created first, humanity had been freed from the evolutionary slow cycles of nature and could pursue spiritual rebirth without that restraint. Resurrection is the return to our true original condition, not from hell or a lower world, but from present consciousness to heaven, the kingdom of God. Salvation or redemption is regaining one's spiritual self through rejection of the material, animalistic life. Barnes also presents a fascinating account of the fall of Adam in psychological terms. He identified the fall as a psychic break from the old state of awareness that was necessary for the birth of a new spiritual consciousness. He identified 4 stages along this route to redemption. It begins in Eden, that is symbolically any first unconscious state of, any unconscious state of psychic unity, where unconsciousness means people are not aware of the psychological forces holding them together. There occurs what is traditionally termed a fall, or breaking of the unity into its component parts and their successive temporal appearance. This is the second birth of consciousness. For consciousness always implies a separation or awareness of difference. From this perspective, the fall is not loss of anything except innocence and ignorance. Spiritually, the fall stems from an increase of knowledge, a breakthrough towards a new unity, causing a breakdown of established unity. It is the start of an advance. When this separating tendency reaches its full extent, 3, a reversal suddenly occurs, and the third stage, that of apocalypse, happens. An apocalypse is the revealing of the hidden and complete form of reality by the burning away of the partial and imperfect perceptions of reality that the fall gives us. We must undergo this fiery, unifying ordeal if our true state in nature are to be manifest. And number 4, finally, redemption occurs, which is the regaining of Eden, but with consciousness. The mind perceives the real Eden burning within and shining through every form of a cool surface of wilderness, a perception symbolized in its specialized form in the biblical burning bush and in its generalized form in Buddha's fire sermon. From my perspective, I think humanity has been working in the second stage for a very long time. And now we are grappling with the third stage, the apocalypse, when so much around us is falling apart, and looking forward to redemption, which includes recognizing the Holy Spirit and the manifestation of God for our time. Man rises and man falls. 2 steps forward and 1 step back. The 2 creations can be seen as mirror images as they move metaphorically in opposite directions. Abdu'l-Baha said, "In no other species in the world of existence can such difference, distinction, contrast, and contradictions be seen as in man." Imagine the patience of the manifestations to handle us. To summarize Barnes' thoughts, the prophet Adam presided over a primordial historical stage of the spiritual conception of humankind, the birth of consciousness, which always implies a separation. And regained Eden is a new, more psychologically complete unity of consciousness, one in which the human perceptual powers are restored in new form, where humanity recognizes its true self. Padme Baragani, named Tahireth the Pure One by Baha'u'llah. She was a poet, mystic, Quranic scholar of renown, a letter of the living of the Bab, explained by the Bab to be the spiritual return of Fatimah, daughter of Muhammad, a fearless teacher of the Babi faith. She was called Zareen Taj, crown of gold, and Zaki, virtuous, by her family and friends, and called Qurra Aini, solace of my eyes, by Syed Kazim. She was a Babi martyr. She was executed. Her last words were, "You can kill me as soon as you like, but you cannot stop the emancipation of women." No reflection on Adam is complete without an excerpt from Tahireh's poem, Adam's Wish. The poetry of Tahireh often took the form of philosophical and religious treatises. John Hatcher and Amrullah Hamad note in their book, Adam's Wish, the Poetry of Tahireh, that the tone of conviction and authority found in her writing indicates that she was a special figure in religious history. They wrote, "One senses that she possessed a knowledge, capacity, and station that set her above even some of the most astute and dedicated followers of the Babi movement. Indeed, some passages possess something of the dynamic tone and power usually associated with the utterances of the prophets themselves." Tahireh's poem, Adam's Wish, has 203 verses, is deeply mystical and difficult to understand if without familiarity with the Quran. Hatcher and Hamad heavily annotated this poem. I'm presenting these 5 verses because they are quite straightforward and have the annotations in brackets, colored, and 1 footnote from the authors. At times, he will make himself manifest in mere specks of dust, Adam. At other times, through the ocean and its waves, Noah. When the waters become tranquil, he may arise with a robe of fire, Abraham. At that time, when you gaze upon him, your destiny and capacity are bestowed on you from Sinai, Moses. He manifests whomsoever he wants to manifest, not one whom you might desire from the past. Thus does he cause the most great spirit to appear in human form. Indeed, I am the harbinger of the mystery of all created things. This footnote, this line, the authors state, could allude to a new manifestation and a new religion, or to the fact that God brings about creation through the intermediary of the manifestation. Our final segment answers the question, when did the prophet Adam live? 6,000 years ago is mentioned in several places in the Baha'i writings. Shoghi Effendi sent a message on May 3rd, 1953, to the All-America Intercontinental Conference that confirms this. He also listed 10 parts of a majestic process that highlighted the role of the tree of life that was protected in the Garden of Eden. Here are key concepts from that letter that illustrate the role of the tree of life. Slow and steady growth of the tree of divine revelation, the tree of life. The fruition of this tree occurred when the Bab appeared as the perfect fruit. The grinding of this sacred seed of infinite preciousness and potency in the mill of adversity, causing it to yield its oil. 6 years later, in the city of Tabriz. The ignition of this oil by the hand of providence in the depths and amidst the darkness of the Sial Shal of Tehran 100 years ago. The clothing of that flickering light, which had scarcely penetrated the adjoining territory of Iraq, in the lamp of revelation, after an eclipse lasting no less than 10 years in the city of Baghdad. The spread of that light to Adrianople and Acre and to 13 countries in Asia and Africa during the life of Baha'u'llah. The spread of the faith during the ministry of Abdul-Baha to 20 sovereign states and dependencies in the American, the European, and Australian continents. The opening years of the second epoch of the formative age of the faith, with over 99 sovereign states, dependencies, and islands of the planet, utilizing the agencies of a newly emerged, divinely appointed administrative order. Then, and only then, will the majestic process set in motion at the dawn of the Adamic cycle attain its consummation, a process which commenced 6,000 years ago with the planting in the soil of the divine will of the tree of divine revelation, and which has already passed through certain stages and must needs pass through still others ere it attains its final confirmation. Shoghi Effendi went on to say that the ninth part of this process was the further diffusion of the light through a decade-long world spiritual crusade, the 10-year crusade. And finally, the 10th part of this mighty process must be the penetration of that light in the course of numerous crusades and of successive epochs of both the formative and golden ages of the faith into all the remaining territories of the globe through the erection of the entire machinery of Baha'u'llah's administrative order in all territories, both East and West. The stage at which the light of God's triumphal faith, shining in all its power and glory, will have suffused and enveloped the entire planet. There is so much more to be gleaned from the narrative of Adam, Eve in the garden, and especially from the two trees. But time is up. The end. And hello again.
So if you wanted to allow people to start asking questions, we can do that, Eileen.
Okay,
I have not seen Peter, unfortunately.
okay, I'm sorry, what did you just say?
I said I do not see Peter. He
Okay,
hasn't been able to join us.
okay. And your other suggestion was?
We could just start with some questions from
Yes,
everyone in the audience, and then we can
yes,
move on.
yes. Depending on how many questions there are, I also have a very short 20-minute presentation on archaeology that I could also fill Peter's time with. So let me click on chat and see what's there. Okay, someone posted Peter's program this morning, which is wonderful. And online resources for this program, great. And from Molly, as we call it, the breaking of the old world order to the new world order. Oh, yes, Molly. How I do agree with that. That is exactly what an apocalypse is. It's a major, major, major break that seemingly happens so suddenly that people look and think that it happened all at once. Well, it didn't happen all at once, but it was like you turn around and then you turn around again, then you turn around again, and there it is. Thank you, Molly. Are there any other questions?
Can I just say one thing? Is that all right?
Yes,
Okay,
please go ahead.
Okay.
Libby.
Elena Marcelo lived two blocks from my home, and I became behind 69, and her book came out in 60. And boy, our local assembly and our community really, Quest for Eden and her whole story was a big deal. And of course, she lived in Hawaii then the rest of her life. So anyway, in Hawaii, we just love Elena Marcella. And thank you for mentioning it, because she and her home is still occupied by a Baha'i family today. So it's wonderful that her home stayed in the hands of the Baha'is so far.
Oh, that is wonderful. And very quickly, I am going to put in the chat to everybody my email address. Without misspellings. If you would like to get on the mailing list to receive the newsletter, just let me know. Okay.
So I'm gonna retype the email because I believe you put an N where you meant to put an M, Eileen.
Oh,
That's
yes.
okay.
Yes,
But we did
yes.
have a question. Could you please write Tahare's original name in the chat again?
Yes. Hold a minute. I've got to bring up the Zoom. And I'm going to do a cut and paste. I don't know how well this will work. It did work. And there it is. And I'll do one other very quick cut and paste. And then we will proceed. Just a second. Okay. And I'm finding it. And I'm not finding it, so it won't get posted right now. Okay, here's what I would like to do, and it will take about 20 minutes. And I haven't looked at this for a couple of months, but I think it's in shape to present. It's about archaeology, and it takes about 20 minutes. And I had at first prepared this to be a filler, and I guess today we need a filler. So let's do it. Let's see how it goes. Hit the share.
There are a couple questions.
Oh, go right ahead. Who is this?
So it looks like we have we have two in the chat, so I'll go ahead and read them
Oh,
off just in
Okay, from
case.
Angela.
Yeah.
Thank you, Angela. What about the notion of Adam and Eve as progenitors? Well, that would be taking a literal viewpoint. And Abdu'l-Baha said these narratives are not to be taken literally. And so I take what he said literally. No, I mean, Adam and Eve, Adam, the prophet Adam, you're looking at 6,000 years ago, but we already know. I presented programs on people who lived 10, 12,000 years ago, Paleolithic Stone Age, who built incredible temples like Göbekli Tepe. So does that answer your question?
Great and perfect response.
You, Joa, wondering about the stages as elucidated by William Barnes as being applicable to the beginning of human life on Earth, to its perfection and evolution into the greater universe. That question, I think, is a little beyond my ability to answer, except that we pretty much know scientifically that the same dynamics occur over and over and over, especially in science and in sociology and anthropology. In other words, there's nothing new under the sun. So the processes that we have gone through on Earth and achieving perfection, which as few souls have, by the way, as it's told in the writings, almost instantaneously, bless their hearts. And we know from the writings that after passing over, we go into the greater universe, and that the greater universe is, oh, I can't quote the writings exactly here, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of planets with conscious life, with sentient life. And maybe they are going through a lot of the same processes. We could really get into, yes, and after we pass over, even if we pass the litmus test here when we pass over, there's an awful lot more for us to do after we pass over. Many more mountains to climb. So many ways for our souls to unfold. Yes. And before Adam, there were other Adams. Peter spoke of a third and a fourth Adam this morning, which one of them was many thousands of years ago, another one maybe hundreds of thousands of years ago. Adam is sort of a generic term for the first conscious, spiritually conscious human. It's a generic term. And as such, that concept of Adam is our father. But no, we're not genetically related to him. Are there any other questions at the moment?
I think we could go ahead and move on to your archaeological presentation if you
Okay.
wanted to do that.
Yeah, I'm going to hit the share button. I'm going to hit the PowerPoint. Going to hit slideshow. Archaeology. A brief survey. We are going to take a brief survey of archaeology and its role in Bible study. Archaeology has validated some of Israelite history as given in the Hebrew Bible, and it also has invalidated some of traditional Israelite history. No problem there, because lack of archaeological evidence for something leaves doors open. Maybe the evidence will be found in a future dig, or maybe symbolism would be a more appropriate approach, or a different narrative might explain a supposed event. It's important to understand how important modern archaeology works, how importantly it works. Archaeology, like medicine, is both an art and a science, and it has been rapidly progressing in the past few decades. We'll approach archaeology in 3 sessions. First, the Prove the Bible enthusiasts who went to the Holy Land to dig and find what would prove their beliefs about the Bible. Second, the emergence of modern archaeology, its discipline and its tools. And third, how archaeology has both proved and disproved various aspects of the Hebrew Bible, opening doors for deeper understanding. Archaeology is a tool for harmony between science and religion. The first wave of archaeologists to the Holy Land was called the Prove the Bible wave because it was amateur archaeologists who were mostly clergymen or enthusiastic lay Christians. They were motivated not by a search for historical knowledge, but by a drive to prove that the Bible was, quote unquote, true. Edward Robinson was among the first. In 1838, he identified a row of stones protruding from the western wall, a remnant of a huge pedestrian vault that came out of the western wall, which is the foundation of the Second Temple, and ended across the street about 45 feet away. It was one of the first traffic interchanges in the world. It was named appropriately enough Robinson's Arch. That was an important contribution. Robinson also discovered Hezekiah's Tunnel in 1838. And the cat is playing with my camera. This underground water aqueduct is an epic story in Israelite history. It was built by King Hezekiah in the late 8th century BCE when the Assyrian army was threatening Jerusalem. And the tunnel connected the Gihon Spring outside the walls of Jerusalem. Okay, looking on your left, here's the tunnel as it looks today. And here is the wall to the city of David, Jerusalem. And here is the Gihon Spring outside the walls. And this is the route that the tunnel took to Siloam Pool. And up here on the right, here's the city of Jerusalem. Let's get back to where we were. And here you can see where the Gihon Spring was. The keys on my computer are very, very sensitive today. Well, we'll forget about redlining that. Just take my word for it. It was a massive engineering project with two teams working from opposite ends and meeting in the middle. I walked through Hezekiah's tunnel, and yes, it is still full of water, and I got plenty wet. But it was an awesome experience to walk through an aqueduct that was 2,600 years old and past the point where the two teams met in the middle. And here is a drawing of the old city of Jerusalem and Hezekiah's tunnel. Let's see if I try to use the red dot again. It held still. And this is the Gihon Spring. Here's the tunnel, and here's Jerusalem. The tunnel took the water underground to the pool of Siloam, which was down here, which I have also been to. It's a major tourist attraction. So far, so good. But Robinson's exploration was not done systematically, let alone scientifically. His team and other explorers after him missed the inscription for the tunnel that described the tunnel's building process. It was located 19 feet inside the Siloam pool towards the end. The inscription was found in 1880 by another team, but it was left unprotected, which is a sacrilege in archaeology. 10 years later, a resident of Jerusalem had the inscription removed from the wall of the tunnel in an amateurish fashion, breaking the inscription into 6 or 7 pieces and damaging several letters. This had been an invaluable finding that was mutilated by a combination of incompetence and people motivated by greed. The major part of the inscription is now located in the Istanbul Archaeological Museum, and it is translated from ancient Hebrew script, and it recounts the moment the two groups of diggers starting from opposite ends met in the middle, when the tunnel was driven through, and this was the way in which it was cut through. While were still axes, each man toward his fellow, and while there were still 3 cubits to cut through, there was heard the voice of a man calling to his fellows, for there was an overlap in the rock on the right side and on the left. And when the tunnel was driven through, the quarrymen hewed the rock, each man toward his fellow, axe against axe, and the water flowed from the spring toward the reservoir for 1,200 cubits, and the height of the rock above the heads of the quarrymen was 1,000 cubits. A cubit is about 18 inches from a man's elbow to the end of the middle finger. So the tunnel is about 1,750 feet, or 1/3 of a mile, chiseled out with hand tools. No power drills. Valuable work was done in the 19th century. However, some of these early diggers, mostly armed with picks and shovels, hammers and chisels, did a lot of damage to the sites that they excavated. I really should say dug. They weren't excavated, especially by destroying strata and not taking careful notes. Tourists looted excavations, and a black market developed fast for artifacts, both genuine and fake. Now, under Ottoman law, the government was the owner of all ancient monuments and artifacts found within the empire, but it could not control the situation in the Holy Land. The British Mandate did better, and that started after the end of World War I. And then from 1948, the Israeli government has strictly controlled which qualified archaeologists can conduct excavations and where and for how long. Slowly through the 20th and 21st centuries, the science of archaeology developed. The simpler tools of a modern archaeologist are a trowel, shovel, picks, sieves, calipers, pickaxes, brushes, dustpans, storage bags, photography equipment, a wheelbarrow, levels to establish a horizontal plane, also mapping tools like tape measure, compasses, and GPS devices. And did you see this toothbrush? That's used for very delicate scraping of a tiny area of an artifact. Modern archaeologists pack heavy and need technological training. Drones for aerial photography, ground penetrating radar to image the subsurface and find objects, metal detectors to find metallic objects, okay, let's pronounce it correctly, magnetometers. Identify and map buried features and structures by measuring variations in the Earth's magnetic field. Computer programs for mapping, artifact analysis, data recording, and 3D modeling to streamline the archaeological process, and laser beams in a process called LIDAR for light detection and ranging technology. LIDAR produces detailed three-dimensional maps of the Earth's surface. LIDAR can often see through vegetation, locating sites otherwise obscured by vegetation. And of course, carbon-14 isotope dating. Put very simply, because I have no scientific background, it's used for determining the age of Earth materials, the age of fossils. Every living organism on Earth has carbon. And when an organism dies, its carbon begins to break down at a predictable rate called a half-life. The half-life of carbon-14 is 5,730 years. So carbon-14 dating is reliable back to about 60,000 years. You can imagine how invaluable it is. For example, when a city was burned down in ancient times, there will be a layer of ash below where the city was rebuilt. Testing the ash for carbon-14 will tell approximately when the city was burned down. The cat's playing with my mirror again, okay. Lastly, stratigraphy, vitally important. Stratigraphy is the study of strata or layers of earth, or layers of a building, or a building that was destroyed and rebuilt. This simplified drawing shows stratigraphy layers from a site in Europe from modern times at the top, then down through medieval times, Saxon times, Roman times, and down to the Iron Age, the oldest on the bottom. To start an excavation site, archaeologists stake off a small area called a trench, and they go down very carefully, very slowly, very meticulously, layer by layer. Artifacts that are found can be dated according to the strata that they are found in, called in situ. Can you find objects in situ in this cross section of strata? Objects. I'm looking myself. Well, we have walls. Oh, we have a Saxon clay floor, a Roman wall, Roman building, post hole with burnt post, but no artifacts. Still fascinating. Archaeologists generally start an excavation by digging a narrow trench and moving on to other trenches. In this photograph, a trench is shown in the foreground and other trenches that were excavated previously in the background. Many archaeological excavations or digs take many years. The work goes so slowly, it's like watching paint dry. The workers record and document each artifact and feature they uncover, paying close attention to their location and context. Everything is documented through photographs, charts, and written notes. Then the lab workers can run various tests on soil samples and artifacts. So the bottom line is that when you hear that archaeology does or does not support something or other, take it seriously and listen to the reasons, read the reasons why. How has archaeology affected the quote-unquote truth of the Bible? Let's look at the archaeological factors involved. The goal of biblical archaeology is not to prove the Bible. Biblical archaeology can be defined as the use of modern archaeological methods to study the material remains of sites and civilizations related to biblical text, to investigate and understand how material findings interact with the biblical record. The Bible presents an enormous historical and geographical portrait of the ancient Near East. Small-scale finds cannot prove the Bible's enormous historical record. They may hint, they may even present a preponderance of evidence. Maybe the evidence will weather time and newly discovered finds will add to their evidence, or not. Large-scale finds, like a city with well-preserved strata and artifacts, can show wider proofs. Archaeology is a very cautious profession and closely peer-reviewed. Professional archaeologists don't issue flamboyant announcements about new discoveries that claim proof of the Bible. If you do hear about such announcements, they are not from professional archaeologists, but from modern-day amateur explorers who are out to prove the Bible. For example, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, Noah's Ark was supposedly found on the top of Mount Ararat. Well, geologists who investigated this claim noted that the proposed site of the Ark was a mineral formation. Noah's Ark will never be, quote unquote, proved because the Ark is a symbol for the covenant of God. As in medicine, new discoveries are constantly found by archaeologists. That doesn't mean that we ignore conventional wisdom. After all, they're the best available in both fields. However, there are acceptances of discoveries that are not apt to change in the future. In medicine, the theory of spontaneous generation, that something comes from nothing, was long ago disproved for all time. And sometimes archaeology makes definitive statements that disprove something in the Bible. For example, in 2010, a ring, now going back here, did I say that it should have said prove something in the Bible, not disprove? In 2010, a ring or bulla was found in an excavation of a 10th century BCE refuse dump at the foot of the southern wall of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The ring, also called a signature ring, bears a seal impression depicting a two-winged sun disk flanked by ants, which are an Egyptian symbol of life, and featuring a Hebrew inscription that reads, belonging to Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah. This was a royal seal of King Hezekiah, whose tunnel we explored earlier. The discovery was announced by the Institute of Archaeology of Hebrew University of Jerusalem, an impeccable source under whose auspices the excavation was conducted. There could not be more conclusive evidence that this was indeed Hezekiah's signature ring. And sometimes total lack of archaeological evidence can be decisive. For instance, there is no archaeological evidence of the Israelites in the Sinai desert as told in Exodus. I emphasize as told because if over 500,000 people lived there for 40 years, traces of campsites and artifacts would have been found. No such evidence has been found despite extensive searches. However, the story of Exodus has far more profound meanings, which we will be going into in another 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. The Israelites did not bring down the walls of Jericho because Jericho did not have walls at the time of Joshua. Surprise! There's no way to put walls there when they weren't there. There hadn't been a city wall for Jericho for several hundred years. And so it goes, but there's a much, much better story waiting for you about how the Israelites actually did enter the Holy Land, the Promised Land. And will be in our Exodus programs also. This is the awesome Western Wall tunnel that was excavated under the Temple Mount, while the open air portion of the Western Wall is approximately 200 feet long. The majority of its original length of 1,600 feet is hidden underground. The tunnel allows access to the remainder of the wall in a northerly direction. Construction of the Western Wall was started by King Herod in 19 BCE as a restraining wall to support the expansion of the Temple Mount. And here is what the Western Wall, which is a retaining wall, would have looked like when it was finished. Here is the Temple Mount, where the second temple used to be and where today there is that magnificent Islamic mosque. And this is the Western Wall. And many, many, many people live right here. Archaeology is an amazing science that helps us to understand the past. However, archaeology can be limited in understanding what it finds. By themselves, these huge stone walls might not say much, but combined with history and scriptural texts, these stones say a lot. Here are some guidelines for your study. Like the field of medicine, the field of archaeology is evolving. Don't be dismayed when archaeologists disagree. They love to argue. Out of their clashing opinions does emerge eventually professional consensus. Consider all the medical studies on coffee and the lack of agreement about the pros and cons of drinking coffee. Science takes time. Peer review takes time. Interdisciplinary collaboration takes time. Israeli archaeologists tend to be secular in their scientific attitude towards their work and do not aim to prove the Bible, while also being very respectful to the Hebrew Bible. They are searching for answers. And there is increasing cooperation between archaeologists and biblical scholars, and respect for each side. So my advice is to read the most reliable articles and books available. Look at the publisher and the author's credentials. Information released by the Israel Antiquities Authority or other archaeological associations associated with universities will be trustworthy. Information found on a biased website might not be trustworthy, although sometimes it makes for interesting reading. And here, I think we have come to the end of this presentation on archaeology. And I think we can pretty much round out this session with any more questions that you might have. Oh,
So, yeah,
thank you, Jane Vernon. Thank you.
if you have questions or you would like to make a comment, now would be the time for anyone in the Zoom. And I'll see what I can look at online. So I'm not seeing anything in the social media on the YouTube or the Facebook. So I guess what we can do is we can do closing remarks, Eileen. And actually Peter Terry was able to join us in the last, I think, 10 minutes. If
I'm
Peter's
sorry,
there.
what did you just say?
Peter Terry was able to join us. He's been here, I think, for about 10, 15 minutes.
Oh,
And I don't know if he's actually there. At least he's in the session. But if he has anything he'd like to say, he's more than welcome.
oh,
Here.
there he is. Well, Peter, we have 25 minutes left.
Well, you've done I was not intending to be absent, but I see that you've covered some terrific terrain. So I'm really glad that you went into this and did it now. I think it's going to be a great foundation for what we're going to do next.
Okay.
I don't know, are there any questions that people asked about the previous session that they wanted us to address?
No. Well, I guess
Well,
we
I
could.
think I'm gonna Yeah,
ahead.
I was just gonna say that I think I will postpone whatever I'm gonna say until the next session. Because it's been, you've really focused on a, a certain kind of presentation and work, and I think that people will go away with a clear understanding if they stick with what you've already presented rather than mix it up with something else.
Okay, okay. Well, next week, I'm going to focus on Abraham, and there's a lot of surprises in that story, and some other topics. But I'll give more information about what the next, short of two things. I'll, in the newsletter, please let me know, send me an email if you want to receive it. I can give a lot more information in the newsletter than I can posting in chat. The short version of how you became a Baha'i. Oh my. Well, this will be very short. Let's just say that back in the 1980s, I was a seeker and a searcher, and I was wandering in the desert of the New Age movement. And it wasn't working. It just wasn't working for various reasons. And then one day, when I had really hit bottom with a lot of things in my personal life and my New Age pursuits, a friend told me about the Baha'i faith. I was not receptive. I had had enough from so-called spiritual people from where I had come from, and I didn't want to hear about anything spiritual anymore. But when I started reading, I started with Nabil's narrative. And by the time I finished that, I was a Baha'i. That was in 1988. And I knew that if I signed my card, my life would go one way. And if I didn't sign my card, my life would go another way. Oh, that was scary. Okay, especially not knowing what the two ways involved. But on faith, I signed my card and I made the commitment. And I have never looked back. And I'm only alive in the truest sense of the word, I believe, because I'm a Baha'i. So that's why I didn't start writing until, 6, 8 years ago. That came very late in life.
Are you a scientist also? Author, and you did a great presentation.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am a writer. We have a 15 to 20% discount on my books right now. And I'm searching to find the information so that I can post it. And I'm feeling very frustrated because I can't find it. So I will find the information by next week. And
That's okay. Eileen, I have it. I'm gonna drop it in the chat right now for everyone in the Zoom.
Thank
And
you.
it's also gonna be on the videos themselves.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Because there it is. If you're an attendee with Clearwater, just check these links. You might want to check them right now and just have them. And you can order my books, especially the trilogy, The Coming of the Glory, which is the Hebrew Bible presented in chronological, systematic order. If you go through that trilogy, you will have a pretty good understanding of the Hebrew Bible. And since my intense interest is in prophecies, you will learn a lot about the 15, 16 prophets of the Hebrew Bible. And amazingly, how all of them, every single one of them, foretold the coming of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. I mean, there are so many reasons why the Hebrew Bible is so important to us today.
Eileen,
Who is my, go ahead.
Eileen, I like to recommend one thing, and I'm what you call a Elena Marcella Quest for Eden Bill Sears kind of I'm a thief in the night Baha'i prophecy, big deal. But what I like to recommend, which is what I did after a while, start to save my pennies. I went to Jerusalem. I went on a 3-day visit, but then I focused on my visit to Bethlehem, to Masada, to Jerusalem, to the Dead Sea Scroll, Qumran 4, right? The cave, so that I would be able to, and I went to the Museum of the Rock to see the scroll of Elijah, you know, anyway, it's really, it puts it, it helps if you can allow a little extra time to do what I call that Christian Old Testament pilgrimage too, because it has made a difference in the world for me. And I notice you've been to several of those places. And once you've seen it, the visual, you walk to the Della Rosa and you walk through, been up to Masada, and you've seen, you know, the actual scriptures. And I've met in Hawaii one of the, in 1948, when they took over the Dead Sea Scrolls from the Pope. And one of the major team members came to Hawaii to talk about what they inherited with the Dead Sea Scrolls and how they carefully, DNA, how they carefully moved in into completing the text. It has made all the difference in my firmness of the faith. And I like to recommend with your absolutely amazing research that you did.
Thank you. I lived in Israel for 16 years when I worked at the Baha'i World Center there. And I have traveled over almost every inch of Israel to wonderful places. It's a very, very spiritual place for me. Okay.
Eileen, were you allowed to go into Nazareth? Because we were asked not to go. You didn't either. Okay, I wondered if you were, because I know we were not allowed to. Okay, thank you.
No, World Center staff were not allowed to go into the West Bank. And Nazareth is in the West Bank. Okay, Jane Vernon asks, who is your publisher? My publisher is Something or Other Publishing. The acronym is SOOP, SOUP, spelled with a double O. And the email address is soup.com. And Wade Franson owns Something or Other Publishing, and that is my publisher. And what is the difference in your 3 books? I mean, in the themes, no difference in the themes. It's simply split up from the very beginning of the Hebrew Israelite experience, from the beginning up through Elijah. And then the second volume starts with the minor and then the major prophets up through the to the exile, or I forget now exactly. And then the last book is post-exilic prophets. Gee, I don't even read my own books. I forget where I made the split. But the whole trilogy is written chronologically. So you start at the beginning with volume 1, which starts 12,000 years ago in prehistory, and takes you on up through to 400 AD with the very last Hebrew prophet, Malachi. Hope that answers your question. The themes are the same, but it's all developmental. I mean, it's not a matter of themes. It's this is what happened, and then that is what developed. And because of that milieu, this prophet emerged, and so on.
So I think now's a good time to go ahead and conclude for the evening.
Yes.
I appreciate your time, Eileen and Peter. And if you have any last words you'd like to say before we close out, go ahead.
Okay, okay, one last thing, Jane, I'm not sure what you mean. You mean books 1 and 3, not the trilogy? 3 of the books are the trilogy. The 4th book is 1844, Convergence in Prophecy for Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and the Baha'i Faith. That is all about the Millerite movement in the United States in the 1840s. So that's a standalone. That's one book. And the trilogy is 3 books, obviously, total of 4 books. Okay, Jeremiah, it's all yours. Pass us off.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate everyone joining today, and we look forward to seeing everyone next week. We have a Sunday morning devotions at 10 a.m. Then we have usually an adult class at 11 a.m. These are our regular schedules. And then this particular series is a special series that we're doing in addition to that at 2 p.m. So we look forward to seeing everyone.